come up a little bit. It's a real blessing to be here. Abby asked if we could speak this morning, and so I want to tell you a little bit about ourselves. I'm local, Michael Cooley, my wife Holly. I grew up here, went to high school with Abby. She's way ahead of me, but that's not true. But my mother and father are both from this area. My father's a Cooley, obviously. He's from over on Hidden River Farms. He grew up over there. My mother's a Racy, so we're both sides of the family local. And a few years ago, after having been an administrator at the hospital, one of the administrators, and working with people from the hospital, and then working as a financial planner, God allowed me to pursue an interest of mine in agricultural development. And in 2019, I began going to West Africa to help pastors and churches to have food security. Many parts of the world are not as blessed as we are, and today is not my goal to make you have a guilt trip because you're going to go home and have pot roast or something, but I want you to have an understanding of what the church is going through in the global south, and kind of show you a solution that God has, one of the solutions that He has blessed us to be a part of. This picture is a woman's group in this community, and they wanted to have a garden. This is in Chennai, India. And these ladies wanted to have a garden because most of the vegetables that people eat come from a certain part of the country. It's like, wow, well, that's what it is here. You go to Food Lion or you go to Walmart, and the vegetables you get don't come from Shenandoah County. They come from California or Mexico. So it's the same situation in India. But much of the church there is facing persecution because the gospel is growing very rapidly and the Hindus aren't too keen on it. And so they're persecuting the church. And as a result, people are having a hard time making ends meet sometimes and a hard time finding good food. They don't have problems with starvation. You cannot get out of sight of a rice field in India. And it's a big country. It could be its own continent. It's rice everywhere, but they don't have vegetables to speak of. So these ladies were given a piece of ground. It was the remains of a highway that had been excavated, and they decided not to run the highway through there. So it was an excavated area 3 feet below the topsoil. It was like the most horrible ground you could imagine, and that's what they were given. They said they were going to grow vegetables, and people told them, no, you cannot grow vegetables there. But one of our trainers in India did some training for them, and they grew vegetables. They're the most beautiful vegetables you've ever seen. And God really blessed it, and they became a testimony to people around. How did you do that? And he said, we did it by following the patterns that God gives us in nature. What we teach is conservation agriculture. It's a form of agriculture that replenishes the soil. It takes land that has been degraded and replenishes it. It takes ground that is good and it keeps it sustained. It was devised in the United States after the Dust Bowl. Everybody's heard about the Dust Bowl. They decided that maybe plowing up the entire prairie and leaving it bare for the drought to blow the dust everywhere wasn't a good idea. So they came up with conservation agriculture. It's not as popular in the U.S. because people like to use chemical fertilizer, but the rest of the world, especially the global south, it's very beneficial because they have a lot of problems. Am I moving around in here?
You're just
okay,
fine.
Sorry, I just realized you had that going.
You do you.
I pace a lot, so I'll try to stay still. But in the global south, the temperature is not what gives them their climates. Like here, it's cold and it's winter and it's hot and it's summer and in between it's spring and fall. They don't have temperature changes. It's hot all the time. They have long periods of no rain and a little period of all rain. It makes it difficult for them to use the methods that we use here in the United States. But that's what they were taught by the colonials. So they have problems. And much of the global south is going into their 4th year of crop failure. And people are having problems having enough to eat. So that's the method we use. We teach people about Romans chapter 1 in the Bible, where God says we can know him by looking at his creation. And we show them how God does things in creation as far as his way of agriculture. And we teach them those methods, and they're very effective against drought, very effective against too much rain. So that's the methods that we're teaching. Our goals are to reduce food insecurity and to improve livelihoods. Many of the churches, we work primarily through the church. Many of the churches there might have $5 a month in the offering. And it's very hard to develop ministry with $5 a month in the offering. It makes it very difficult. So with the methods that we teach, the congregation, people are brought up out of poverty, and they are taught to give, and they give of their heart, and by the 3rd year they're giving lots and lots back to the church, and we're finding this to be the case in many areas. We've got programs where we're tracking it, and God's really blessing. We do work through the church. There are many agricultural development organizations, hundreds and hundreds. And there are even a good number of Christian agricultural development organizations. But what God has done is he has blessed us in that we work through the church, and our adoption rate is higher than the other programs. Adoption meaning you go and you learn how to do something, and then you go back and you actually do it. You adopt the practice. And we're having very high adoption rates, and God is really blessing it. We give him the glory. There's accountability with the church. We form WhatsApp groups, that's like text message groups. And when people are planting, they're sending pictures. My phone's been vibrating the whole time I've been here because they're 4 to 7 hours ahead, and they're sending me pictures of their crops. And so the rest of their group see that too, and they're like, oh, I gotta get busy. You know, he's got his corn is already up, and I have just begun to plant mine. I must make sure it has mulch. And so we're having a lot of good results with that. They support each other, and they're able to do training through the church. So we're having very good success working through the church, and God has blessed that model. I'm going to show you a few pictures, and then I'll be done. This is a typical cornfield in Africa. What has been happening the last 3 or 4 years, they have a good crop, it comes up, it looks great, and then the rain stops. And the rest of their rainy season doesn't exist. And because of the way they do their agriculture, the maize doesn't continue. It dries up. And so then they have no crop. This is a young man in Ethiopia. That last picture, I believe, was in Liberia. This young man is in Ethiopia in a field where they're trying to grow sorghum. And they've had very bad drought there. You're going to be hearing about that in the news. Like way back in the day when they had Live Aid rock concert to raise money and stuff. It's going to happen again. They are in a really desperate situation. This is in northern Kenya, where most of the farmers herd cattle. There's nothing for the cattle to graze on. So before the animal becomes nothing but skin and bones, they kill it early so they at least have some meat. I was telling the group the other day at lunch that sometimes now the farmers are hunting hyenas, which is one of the nastiest looking animals on earth. And the children won't eat the meat because the meat is bitter. But that's what they're doing to try to survive. This looks like a nice picture. People happy, dancing around and clapping their hands. This is a sad picture to me. These people have just received bags of corn out the back of a truck from the UN. That's the only way they get to eat, is if people from the West are feeding them. That's not right. There is more than enough land that is not being farmed in just Africa to feed the entire world. We could be eating, the whole world would be eating from what is available. They have the most amazing soil. It's not their soil. It's the way that things are being done. And so when I see people receiving white bags of corn, I'm happy that they're not starving, but I'm sad that they have to depend on the West. It is a dependent continent. This is a picture of, I know you probably can't read this stuff in the back, but this is the Global Hunger Index. You can probably see colors. So light green means that up to 30% of the people, up to 20% of the people in those light green areas wake up in the morning and aren't sure if they're going to have enough to eat that day. The yellow is up to 35% of the people don't know if they're going to have enough to eat that day. The orange one's up to 50%, up to half the people when they wake up. The father has to say, I don't know, son, if we're going to have breakfast today. I'm not going to have to wait till dinner again. It's a terrible thing to think of. You know, I show numbers all the time, and I can tell you numbers, but I can't tell you the faces of pastors who I know myself who have said we are only eating every other day now because what we can find is so expensive I cannot afford it. It shouldn't be that way. And we're called in the scriptures many, many times. If I had 3 hours, I could preach to you the scriptures that tell us that we are responsible for our brothers and sisters' needs. So let's have some happy pictures. This doesn't look like a big deal. This is just a pile of corn. This corn was grown by Pastor Musa Paca in Sierra Leone. We went to one of our trainings, and the training was at the end of the rainy season. At the time, the opposite time that you plant. But he decided he was going to try it anyway. So he went and he planted, and he used all the principles, and he kept it mulched. And when the time come, after the corn had grown its full size, he harvested to the amazement of anyone that was watching him. So to give you an idea, it's like if you went out to plant your tomato. How many of you grow tomatoes? Raise your hands high so I can see. Don't be shy. Okay, so it's like if you went to plant your tomato plants in the middle of October. What are you talking about? You're not going to get any tomatoes that way. Well, that's what people thought about him. But he harvested. Children came from all around to watch him. All the village children, they were saying, what are you doing, Pastor Musa? Where did this come from? I grew it. We cannot believe it. Here, have some. He's giving it all away to them. Some of these children went home. 78% Muslim town. Some of these children went home and, look. And one of the fathers is like, where did you get that? Pastor Musa. No, it is impossible. Yes, Pastor Musa, I saw it. I will get to the meaning of this. I will get to the bottom of this. And he goes to Pastor Musa's house. And he says, where did this come from? Musa says, I grew it. No, it is impossible. You cannot grow in the drought season. It's impossible. Yes, I did it. I did it the way God shows us in his creation. Jesus did this. And man said, you must teach me. I must know how this is done. So he was able to share the gospel and share this agricultural method with his Muslim neighbor. This is Monica. This was a year ago last month in Malawi. which is a tiny, skinny little country in south central Africa. My trainers wanted me to visit her. She planted this big acreage of maize. In a real small plot, she used our methods because she was not confident. She didn't want to risk all her maize. So she planted a little bit with our methods and the rest with her own. And when I went to see her, what she planted with conservation agriculture was about that high, and all the rest of her maize wasn't up to her knee. And she said she planted it the same day. I was like, are you sure? The same day? Yes, the same day. I will do it all this way next year. So that was great. I was happy. 3-4 months later, they had Cyclone, what's the name? Cyclone Freddy, thank you. Cyclone Freddy. It was in our news. And it wiped out most of the southern half of the country of Malawi got wiped out by this. It's like our hurricane. And her entire crop was lost, except for the crop that she planted with conservation agriculture, because the stalks were stronger and they had better root system. And so that is the maize that she was able to harvest because of the method. She had no other maize. Everything else was ruined by the storm. These are not pygmies. These are normal-sized African people. They're not as tall as me. They're about like this. My son says I'm big in Africa. So, but this is one of the crops in one of the little tiny villages in eastern Liberia. They grew this using termite mound material as fertilizer. It's very effective. So this isn't a very clear map, but you can see in the middle that little red dot. That is where I was working in 2019 when God led us to start this, Holly and I. We didn't have any idea what was going to happen. These are the countries in green where we are now. I'm not in my beautiful home west of St. Luke as much as I would like to be nowadays. But God is blessing, and we have ministries all over, and we are training people just as fast as we can, and we're training lead trainers just as fast as we can. These lead trainers go and they train other trainers in different locales, and those trainers go and train villagers and farmers. And the demand is so high, and we have so many groups that represent millions of church attendees. Kali Haywood Church in Ethiopia has asked us to train all their member farmers. It's 12 million farmers. The All Africa Baptist Fellowship, they want us to train all their churches, 50,000 churches. And we are producing trainers just as fast as we can, but we're trying to build training stations to train those trainers so that when they go out, they're doing the training at standard, which is one of the principles that we teach. This is last month. This is me outside of Kampala, Uganda, where one of our training centers is that we're trying to develop. These are my two farm managers, Fiona and Joan. They will be running the farm once we get it up and running, and we have trainers that will come in. We are marking off the plots. This is the design of the training center at the ABU farm. Fumvudza, you probably aren't familiar with that word. Fumvudza is a Shona word. It means you can see it coming. Like now, Holly and I were talking about hearing the birds in the morning, hearing the songbirds like robins and stuff. What does that mean? That means spring is coming. And I'm pretty glad for it. I don't know about the rest of you. Maybe you guys all like the cold weather. I don't know. But that's Fumvudza. It's a Shona word. So we teach a method called Fumvudza, and not to go into any detail, but it produces a plot of land, a very small plot of land, 1/7 of an acre. And in that 1/7 of an acre, a family is able to know when they plant that they will have enough food, that they will not go hungry for 1 year. And we are doing it everywhere. And the concept to them of predictable yield, it's not something they have ever had in their culture. And we are giving them the concept of predictable yield, so when they plant, they know they will have enough. And so it's a blessing. But these are the thoughts at the farm that we're developing. These are well-watered gardens. This is a vegetable garden demo. We've made compost, and this is what we're working on now. We're trying to develop. We're short with funding, so that would be something if anybody wants to help us with, we would love to have you join us in this. That's all I have. You've got your phone, you want to scan that thing, that'll take you to our website. I think we have cards and we have a newsletter that Holly produces. We're told everyone loves to read it. It's really entertaining. It's really nice. She does a great job with it. You can find out, see pictures, and find out what we're doing. We have prayer cards. You want to hold that up again? We're told, I can't verify this, we're told if you put that on the refrigerator that you will not have roaches or mice in your kitchen. But it scares them off. So, anyway, God bless you guys. Thank you for letting us share what God is doing. We'll be happy. I'll be around afterwards, happy to answer questions afterwards. But we thank you for allowing us to come today. God bless.